Welcome back to the Investor Professor podcast. This is Dr. Ryan Peckham, and this is episode 39. Got another great interview for you today. Can't wait to tell you all about it. I'm joined by Nick Pinto with Seed Invest. And so let's get started. Let's get to work. All right. Well, on today's show, I'm going to be joined by Nick Pinto, who is the Director of Business Development for Seed Invest. So I have to introduce you to what Seed Invest is and kind of how this interview came to be. Well, one of the questions that a lot of young investors or just investors in general, there's a common curiosity of how do I invest in companies before they go public, right? So think of how do you invest in Uber or Lyft or companies before they go public? Well, a lot of those kind of companies go through rounds of financing before they become public companies. And so, funny enough, sometimes that's called seed money. And there are certain platforms that you can invest in these type of companies on. Now, it is much higher risk level. There's no guarantee that these companies are ever going to grow into anything. But it could be, a nice piece of your portfolio if you're looking for that kind of investment. And so I reached out to Seed Invest because, in full disclosure, as you'll hear in the interview, I use Seed Invest personally. And so that being said, I'm not your financial advisor. Nick is not your financial advisor. This is all for entertainment purposes only. So please consult your financial advisor before making any financial decisions. And past performance is not indicative of future results. And so that is definitely something that needs to be said in this episode because, as I just addressed before, investing in companies before they go public is one of, it's not the most risky thing you can ever do, but the level of risk is definitely heightened. And one of the main reasons for that is because there's not a public market for you to sell your shares. So when you invest in a private company, you have to be willing to hold that investment for the foreseeable future, which Nick and I discussed. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Nick. I think you're really going to enjoy this one, and I hope you learn a lot. So here we go. All right. Well, welcome back to the program, everybody. I am excited today. I have Nick Pinto with Seed Invest. Nick, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks so much for having me.
So why don't you tell everybody what your role is with Seed Invest?
Certainly. So I'm a business development director at Circle and Seed Invest. Circle is Seed Invest parent company, a crypto finance company that acquired Seed Invest in 2019. And Seed Invest is a two-sided marketplace that provides founders access to capital and provides investors with highly vetted investment opportunities.
Awesome. Well, that was one of the main reasons that I wanted to reach out and talk to y'all is because I have, we get a lot of questions about how do I invest in companies before they go public?
Right.
I say, well, have you heard of Seed Invest? Have you heard of these platforms? And a lot of people, even though if you're in the finance world, people know about it, but I don't think still like retail investors really know a ton about this space. Mm-hmm. And so I like it because it does give you kind of a broad area of being able to invest. And in full disclosure, I have used Seed Invest. I have active investments on Seed Invest, and I have since 2016. And so, you talk about how these companies are vetted. How does Seed Invest vet the companies that end up on the site?
Yeah, good question. And by the way, I did take a look at your portfolio. You've made some good bets. So I guess there's a reason we call you the investor professor, Yeah. Good question on vetting. So we have a venture team, and that team's responsible for sourcing, doing diligence, and underwriting our deals. Our team consists really of former investment bankers, venture capital investors, entrepreneurs who work closely with the companies who are interested in raising. And so we make sure we're asking the right questions to really understand the business, the value proposition, and of course, how we can ultimately effectively market the fundraise and position it to our investors. And we then host deal committees, we call them, on a weekly basis, where we get buy-in from the rest of our team. So we have an onboarding team perspective, a campaigns team perspective, a capital markets team perspective. And actually, I worked at a VC fund while I was in business school prior to returning to Circle and Seed Invest. And I don't think the process is too different. We just move at a faster pace, given the number of deals we're seeing. Obviously, we're seeing quite a few deals on a weekly basis, and also just given the speed of the market and how quickly companies are able to raise capital these days, we have to also move quickly.
Right. So do you find the companies, or do they find you? Or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix of both, certainly, outbound and inbound. We have been working more closely recently with venture capital funds and accelerators and incubators, et cetera, to kind of increase the quality, if you will, of our deal flow. But still, I'd say the majority of that is inbound. So I think what's cool is, I think some people view Seed Invest as, okay, you can come on, and if you have a $1 million, $2 million, $5 million round, whatever it is, Seed Invest will raise that entire round. We can do that, and we actually have a round that's a 70 million Series C right now that we can talk about. But we're also very comfortable working alongside VCs and really topping off rounds, and we've seen that be a successful strategy for us recently. Companies raising 5 million, maybe they have 3.5 in committed capital. We can kind of come in and just top off that 1.5 million for them.
Wow, that's great. Well, and it does give people, it gives kind of the retail investor, I'm going to say the little guy, like the opportunity to invest in some really neat businesses. I mean, like that you would not have the opportunity to do unless, if there wasn't a platform like yours available.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole mission. In 2012, when our founders, Ryan Feit and James Hahn, started the business, it was really to democratize the venture capital asset class. And that was for founders, but also for investors that didn't previously have access to these kind of opportunities. And, we've seen, I think, based on the market and based on a lot of other platforms that are out there now doing something similar, I think that's been validating in terms of the demand and appetite from retail investors to really diversify their portfolio and invest in startups.
Yeah. And one of the things another important point to talk about is that, like, the ones that I've invested in. So, Virtuix, the video game, Nowrex, Nightscope, which recently went public.
Yep.
You get copies of their financials. Like, they send out an update every 3 months. Is that something y'all require them to do? Or is that something that the companies are doing on their own because they want to be proactive, or they're looking to kind of start acting like a public company?
We do require that. It's part of the contract, and we take that very seriously. I think some, investors before we existed might invest in a private company, and it's easy for that company to go off the grid if things aren't going well, right? And actually, we just had a nice little product update where now investors can go in and go to their portfolio page, and see the update right there. So we facilitate that portfolio quarterly reporting for companies and get the update from them, and then put it in the investors' kind of portfolio page where they can check it out. Now it's nice to have a full holistic view of your portfolio and kind of what's going on with those companies.
Yeah, and it just makes it nice because you do get regular communication from them, so you know what's going on. It makes you feel better because, unlike, if you buy stock in a company in a public market, right? So if you buy shares of Apple, you can go sell them. You can buy them right now, and you can sell them 30 minutes later if you want to. But one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're investing in private companies is that you're going to be owning the shares for a while. I mean, you have to know that I'm going to, if I put money into this, I'm going to be holding it for the foreseeable future until there's some kind of exit event or until they go public or something of that nature. So, you got to be in it for the long haul.
100%. And we make that very clear. You have to expect to hold on to these investments for 5 to 7 years. We are hoping ultimately to release a secondary trading platform, which I think would be really cool. I'm not sure the timeline on that. Maybe sometime this year, maybe sometime next year. But what's cool is, given we've been around now for about 10 years, we are starting to see some interesting exits happen. You mentioned Nightscope, which is now public. We actually had the first unicorn in equity crowdfunding history called Heliogen. They raised with us in 2017 at a 20 million pre-money. And now they're public on New York Stock Exchange with a market cap of over $1 billion. So that was very exciting for us, and certainly validating for what we're doing. And we're starting to see, some exits and certainly some markups. I've just seen with Nowrex, which first raised with us at a $10 million valuation or so, and is now raising with us again at a $275 million valuation pre-money. So we're certainly starting to see some traction in terms of meaningful events for our investors, which is obviously the point of investing in startups. So that's exciting.
Right. Well, I'm not that smart because I didn't get the one that went to $1 billion. But I do. But I like Nowrex. Like I did invest in Series B round and Series C. I was like, man, this thing is going to be, I feel really good about their prospects. So,
yeah, we love Kerry Breeze, the CEO of Nowrex. He's a great guy. And again, that's a really cool story for us is Nowrex, because they initially did a $1 million seed round with us back in, I think, 2016. And then they raised a 7 million Series A with us that went quite well. Then a 20 million Series B, and now a 70 million Series C. So
wow,
we love to see, obviously, companies that come back and continue to raise with us. I think we've had over 250 companies raise with us successfully, but also well over 300 offerings, because a lot of those companies are repeat issuers, but is obviously great for us.
Well, that's what I was gonna point out that, I see a lot of the same ones coming back like a year later, which proves, that they have to execute and they have to be doing well in order to come back for another rate. There's some things that has to be going well for the company in order for that to happen. So it's nice 100%. That y'all have so many of those that are going well.
Well, I think also what's been cool is these issuers are seeing the value in having a community of investors. An investor, even at $1,000 number, is going to be such a bigger supporter than even your best customer. They're true brand evangelists for what the companies are doing. A cool little anecdote. I remember Nightscope, they raised 20 million with us, and they had over 1 million people view their Seed Invest profile during the raise. And they started the fundraise as a relatively unknown brand, and they ended the fundraise, with robots in LaGuardia Airport. I'm not saying that Seed Invest is responsible for that, but it does show kind of the marketing and awareness that companies can raise through fundraising via crowdfunding. And I think that's a big part of the value proposition is the marketing benefits that you get from that.
Yeah, and just knowing that the people that are investing are probably that they're going to be true fans of your business, and
100%.
And also too, like I also want to say, that it's not all roses here. Like I invested in somebody, or I tried to, and I was really impressed because something with the deal went bad, and Seed Invest was like, hey, I don't know what happened, but basically like something went squirrely somewhere, and Seed Invest had refunded my money right away. And I was really impressed with that, because like it hadn't, for those of you who haven't done this before, so you basically send your money to Seed Invest, and then it kind of goes through the process, and then it ends up going to the company or whatever. But there's a time frame in there where it just kind of, I don't know, is not stagnant, but it's just working its way through. It's not as fast as like buying a share of stock on the stock exchange. And I guess something happened, but Seed Invest was like, hey, we're terminating this relationship. And within like 2 days, the money was back in my account. And I just thought, I thought, man, that's really good. Like they really are vetting these companies. And if something doesn't go right, they're okay saying, okay, this isn't working. We're gonna protect our investors. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Appreciate you calling that out. I think that's also a differentiator for us is we take investor protection very seriously. So a good example of that is we will set target minimums that a company has to raise in order for the campaign to be successful. And that's typically computed off some sort of calculation that takes into account monthly burn and make sure the company has, roughly 12 months of burn. And it's crazy if you look at some of these other platforms, it's interesting to us where sometimes they might set an escrow minimum of $10,000, $20,000. And so, and it's really there are companies that have cash in the bank and that's fine for, but what about the companies that okay, they raised $30,000, and then after 3 months, they're out of cash, and then those investors are out of luck. So yeah, investor protection is something we take very seriously. I think it's also, a lot of these other platforms might have 80, 100 offerings live at a given point. We usually have about 20 or so live at a given point, and that's very intentional. Certainly quality over quantity, and we very much view ourselves as a service-oriented business, both for entrepreneurs and investors.
Yeah, and that does make it helpful when you're an investor trying to look through those deals. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I got a fire alarm going off in my building, but we're just gonna keep going, Nick.
Let's keep going. Why not? Yeah, it's all good.
But when you go to your website, like the fact that you don't have 100 deals, that becomes very tedious as an investor to try to figure out what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's also nice is at the same time, we are pretty much industry agnostic. So we'll have fintech deals, healthcare deals, SaaS, robotics, AR, VR, blockchain. So while we're selective, we also want to make sure that we're providing investors with the widest array of opportunities, because which actually is really cool to see is we have a discussion board, and there oftentimes, given we have 640,000 investors on our platform, there will be true subject matter experts on a different business, on maybe an agriculture business, and those investors will then start asking the entrepreneurs really smart questions and start a dialogue that way, which I think is just great to see, and also great sort of learning for other investors who might be interested. So,
yeah, that is very, very helpful to know that's available, and that y'all have already thought enough ahead to have that available for people.
For sure.
Like I've learned a lot just reading through the slide decks of a lot of businesses, even if it might be something I don't really want to invest in. Right. I've learned a lot just reading through them. There's a lot of knowledge you can get just by doing that.
I also think you can learn a lot about a founder by the way that they answer questions. So on the discussion board, as I mentioned, but we also do a bunch of webinars where the founder goes on, and you'll have 100 plus investors there who are interested in investing and asking them questions. Sometimes we'll do like a demo day style. We might have 6 companies, but I think it's really interesting to see how founders respond to questions, particularly tough questions, and founders that aren't defensive about certain things, or aren't defensive about competition or defensive about a lack of revenue, but really explain it well and explain kind of the intentionality behind what they're doing. I think there's a lot to be gleaned from that, as well as to your point of reading through a deck.
Well, and it's funny you bring that up. So one of the things I tell students that I'm teaching, or even clients that I talk to, one of the things that really bothers me is when I read annual reports and there's not a letter from the CEO talking about what the what are the goals of the business or whatever. And it's kind of to your point, like, I'm like, man, you can't just pin a letter to tell us what your 5 objectives that you're trying to do are. It's just funny. That's just one of the things I look for. I'm like, why have you not done that?
Yeah, it's funny because I think people, in the public markets might view those as, they're sort of just boilerplate. But actually, I think there's a lot to be learned from those if you read between the lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, that's one of the ways you can get an advantage. So I have to tell you something funny. So one of the ones I invested in, my most recent one was Death and Company, right?
Nice. Yep.
So I go to Denver a couple of weeks ago. And I actually go. It's the first time I've ever been able to go to a place. They have them in, I think, LA, Denver, and New York. And I think we're raising money for one in Miami, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, the lady, goes, well, how did you hear about us? And I go, actually, I invested with y'all on Seed Invest. And she's like, really? The latest round? And I said, yeah. And she goes, you'd never heard of us before? And I go, no. And so anyways, they gave us, they let me sample a drink for free, and then they gave me, so much off my bill. But I was just really impressed. Like, this was just an employee at a shop in Denver, but she was completely aware that they were raising money as a company for something else. I mean, the employee awareness was really kind of great to see. And so it was kind of fun. It just made it fun for me to be able to go see that, but you could tell like they really cared.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because, I was saying about investors really being brand evangelists for the companies they invest in, kind of goes the other way too. I think entrepreneurs and companies really appreciate having investors on their cap table and that believe in their mission. Actually, it was cool. We had when they first raised with us, when Death & Co first raised with us in 2018, we had an investor event out there in Denver to invite investors who are interested in learning more and meet the founders and have a few drinks, of course. And there was a investor who hadn't invested previously in Seed Invest, who saw some flyer or email on the event, came to the event, next day invested $500,000 in Death & Co. So that was pretty cool. So clearly they're doing something right.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where I went and I go, man, I wish I could go back in there and tweak the number, like I should have done that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing, and when it comes to this, because I tell, other investors, I'm like, when you're doing, startup investing, I mean, let's say you make 5 investments. I mean, you're really hoping one of those works out or 2. Right. You're never going to be 100%. And so, you got to kind of go into it with a grain of salt, and you never know which one's going to be the one that does well. So I always just kind of, keep my eyes open and look at it. But and it's also too, with the way any investing goes, you got to invest in things you're interested in, or things that you think you're going to be interested in.
Yeah, 100%. Diversifying, especially within the asset class, is so important. What's actually cool is, not to oversell Seed Invest here, but we are relaunching our auto invest program, which allows you to allocate a certain amount of capital, and then we'll invest it for you across 10 to 20 different businesses. And I think that's a really cool way to sort of diversify within the venture asset class as well. Because that's the nature of the business. One's going to hit really well, a couple are going to do well, and then a few of them unfortunately aren't going to make it. But that's just how it goes in venture. Yeah,
that's just the way it goes. So one of the curious things. What's y'all's minimum investment?
Yeah, so for the most part, on average, I'd say it's $1,000.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. I just didn't know if that was like the number across the board or not, but that seems pretty much like what it normally is, right?
Yeah, and what's cool is we kind of touched on this, but really anyone can invest. It's super simple to sign up. You put in your email, password, and we do have accredited investors as well. We have about 80,000 accredited investors. And we have a few deals that are for accredited investors only. And there might be a few reasons why a company does that to keep it private. Maybe they don't have a community that they want to engage, less information sharing. There's a little bit less regulatory hurdles to jump through. And maybe it's a smaller round. But for the most part, a heavy majority of our opportunities are available to everyone.
Yeah. And did you say you had 640,000 users? Is that what you said?
Yep, that's right.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. That's a lot of it's a lot of opportunities for those people, but it's also enough people where you get better deals because companies are like, wow, that's a lot of people we have access to.
100%. It's kind of was interesting, similar to what we saw in the public markets, sort of the retail boom in the public markets during COVID, game stonk and AMC and stuff. We saw a similar thing in the private markets, and our user base really grew and has been growing ever since, which has been good to see.
Yeah, because I'm, just looking at the deals that are up there. It seems like you don't have any lack of companies to go look at. Do you have a time frame? Like if somebody raises money, do y'all limit them for when they can come back? Like Nowrex, for example, because we talked about them. Is it a year? Is it just kind of when the company needs to, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's not a set time frame, certainly, but it's interesting. It's we do have a fund, but we're not really investing ourselves, right? We're trying to provide our investors with the best opportunity. So if a company raises and just wants to come back again to raise, we're not just going to say yes automatically. We really review it on a case by case basis, even for companies that have raised with us multiple times. But yeah, I think especially if they're looking for maybe a higher valuation or looking for capital for certain needs, we'll need to see kind of meaningful business updates on their end to approve it and to feel comfortable offering it to our investors. But there's not really a set timeline in that sense.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Well, I appreciate all your time. Is there anything else we should know?
Ryan, really a pleasure. Only thing I'll say, a little teaser, is that, as I mentioned, Circle, it's a crypto finance company, it's our parent company. And I think there's going to be some really interesting stuff that's happening with Circle and Seed Invest this year from a product standpoint. And so stay tuned and kind of updates on the platform, more to come there, but I'm really looking forward to it.
So you talk about Circle. I don't know as much about Circle. So if I wanted to learn about Circle and that world, where would I go?
Yeah, you can go to circle.com.
Okay.
Essentially now Circle is a bank account for crypto native businesses, all built on top of our platform USDC, which is a stable coin pegged to the US dollar. Right now, Circle is really a business-oriented solution for crypto native companies. Over time, hopefully, we'll be also able to address the needs of traditional businesses. But I think over the course of next year, there's going to be some cool synergies happening between Circle and Seed Invest.
Isn't it amazing that Circle.com wasn't taken? You hear a name like that, and you're like, wow, how is that available? But that's pretty funny. Well, man, Nick, I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Ryan, pleasure. Thanks so much.